Trying to work out, is he left-handed or right-handed?
Morning, morning all, welcome. Yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. It just depends on how you want to capitalize on that that question. So I'm not sure. So Lee, we're capitalizing on thinking this morning, are you? So we're turning thoughts into money with a bit of luck. That'll make the trip happy, I'm sure. So yeah, you better lead us in and tell us what that plan is and how we're going to do it.
Well, thanks, Ivan. I definitely have no answers today. I've got more questions than answers. So the question is, and Edward, it's lovely to have you with us because I was thinking of you so much on Friday when we were talking about groupthink, because that was really a topic that you had raised, and this comes out of that is. So if we are going to be working in groups, how do we capitalize on that combined thinking? And as I say, I don't have answers, I have more questions. And one of the questions I have is the role of disruption or the disruptor. So there's somebody it seems as if it's important for there to be somebody in the group, or maybe one or two people in the group, who throw things off track or come up with bizarre ideas or out of the box thinking, however you want to put it. And it stimulates a new round of thinking that helps the group to get onto a different trajectory or to differentiate themselves, if you think about it in terms of a business sense. And so they seem to have a really important role. Well, they do have an important role, but at what point does that disruption become destructive? And how much of a role does the disruptor play in the ongoing rollout? So it's almost like there's this, you get the stimulation, and then something needs to happen to be able to move that idea forward so we can test it, so we can see if it works. But the role of the disruptor is that they want to keep disrupting. They want to keep making things happen in new ways, but we haven't tested this idea yet. And so that's one of the questions that I'm asking, is the role of the disruptor. And then also, so the second question I'm asking is, in terms of bringing groups together, is how defined do you make your own role? In terms of your gifts, your talents, and then each of the people in the group. So I think about the wisdoms group. So Trevor is clearly the strategist. Ivan is systems and processes. I'm the facilitator, salesperson, taking to market. Those clearly defined roles have worked really well for us. We never step on each other's toes because we respect those spaces really, really well. But that doesn't mean that when we meet together, I love Ivan smiling there, when we come together, that we come as equal thinkers into the party. And we don't, yes, we wear those hats, but we also are prepared to listen and to think outside of just this role that we have. Whereas I find in other groups, sometimes the role becomes so defining that I can't, there's no flexibility. So I don't know if I'm talking too much and saying too much. So as I say, I'm make more questions than answers in terms of the role of the disruptor, and then other people's roles in terms of what they do, and how flexible are you in terms of the roles. And maybe it's also, if I add just one other thing, is timing. Is at what point do you become more and more defined in terms of what you do versus a startup where maybe everybody has to put their hand in and make things happen? Or is it always going to be dependent on the role or the area that you have a specific strength in? Over to you, everybody.
Thanks, Lee. Well, I think we better get across to the person in the group who is, you know, the mediator and the nice person, and, you know, brings everybody together and never creates conflict or concern or disruption, and you know, really is. So we'll start with the soft stuff. That's Trevor. So it's over to you now.
The nice Trevor. You can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah. I'm not sure about the nice Trevor, but certainly that Trevor. I don't know about the other Trevor, but we'll get to him later. So.
Listen, I think this is the fundamental topic for all enterprise, and I think this COVID situation is going to create a dilemma for the vast majority of corporates and entrepreneurial operations, because they don't understand this idea of being able to brainstorm quality ideas and then to action and test to see which ideas are going to work in an uncertain environment. So when you said strategist, I thought the discussion was going down the road that I'm the primary disruptor of the whole lot, because that's how I see myself. In this type of environment, what's been happening to me and what have I been doing in the 170 odd days here. But here are the thoughts that go through my head. I think there is a luxury within a corporate environment, and it is a double-edged sword. And that luxury is the luxury of a salary, especially right now, where people are going to be absolutely protective of their salary. And I've hardly ever seen a corporate. The only corporates that I've actually seen who actually respect a disruptive thinker are those who recognize how good that disruptive thinker is. And then it's only for a short period of time. So if you're going to have a look at my history within corporate environments, my max in how many corporates? 2 is 18 months. And I created one of the corporates. And that was because my role as a disruptive strategist or an innovative strategist was done. In fact, a third one, because I did that Colonial Security Initiative. And what I recognized is that are completely disruptive the thinking of what was happening in this colonial community. But within about 9 months, the people who just want stability and security and don't rock the boat, they really wanted to take over and bring some stable managers in. And that guy who rocked the boat 9 months ago that created a R1 billion initiative, you know what, let's rather get some stability where people will be more popular and more people will come on board. And then I think what happens there, and I've seen it in every organization that I've been around or close to, and throughout listed companies, that cycle tends to go, these individuals, let's take Steinhoff, because I was watching Steinhoff in depth yesterday. What happens is that this culture of stability and that sort of thing, you then start getting clever auditors and accountants who turn around and say, okay, well, I'll do the bidding of the guy who's now at the top, and they jiggle a figure here, jiggle a figure there, all of a sudden it's R1 billion, and the shareholders are suddenly, their 50 Rand has eroded down to 80 cents, which is what has happened in Steinhoff at the moment. And what you find is that crisis happens within that corporate, and it either disappears or they try and reinvent that. And you then need the turnaround specialist to come on board. That's when Trevor Carty enters the picture. You need turnaround specialists at that point to turn around and say, hey, I've been through this, I've seen all this before. Now we need to, this is what you have to do. And that turnaround specialist is similar to the disruptive innovator, needs disruptive innovator, but actually has the luxury of some assets, resources, and cash. I better shut up. Eh? This fresh air is beautiful. I can think here.
Thanks, Trevor. Sure. I'm not sure where you were leading us with all of that, but let's see. So we better get across to Trevor Carty next, seeing that you were pointed at and referred to in that particular monologue. But yeah.
Well, I turned around, Trevor, and it's just as ugly behind me, buddy. So turnaround strategies, I'm not so sure. Yeah, I think it comes down to a couple of things. I think when you're small, you play a number of different roles. But I think it always comes down to your key performance indicators. And I just love not the stun of Tesla story. And, you know, when you see now Elon Musk for the first time getting a CEO, he can concentrate on brilliance. That's just an indication that he's come to that level in his business space where he can't do everything and be all things to all men, and that he needs to have someone free him up of things that are not key performance related. Yeah, so I think it all comes down to key performance indicators.
Right, thanks, Trevor. Right, Ed, I think we better come across to you. You know, the scary accountant that frightened Trevor when he was small. I'm not too sure if you knew him then, but.
Hopefully you can hear me this time.
Ooh.
If you can hear me, put your thumbs up, please, Ivan. No?
No, we're struggling
Okay.
in Ed for some reason. It was sounding better earlier, but it's warbling again now. You've muted yourself now, so let's just try again.
Is that any better at all?
That's slightly better, yeah. Let's.
You can hear this time? Yep. Okay. I listened to the YouTube recording from Friday, and particularly Trevor talking about we don't really need discussions. We need to listen to what consumers say. And I did wonder whether if in 1880 Mr. Benz had listened to consumers, he'd have made a faster horse rather than a motor car. So that was one of my thoughts. And also, focus groups are very good at asking what people want. And I remember in the old days, when you signed up for a mail order catalogue, you got a free gift. And one company had a focus group to decide what free gift to have, and everyone came up with the toaster. And when they left, they were allowed to take whatever gift they wanted from the selection. And almost to a person, everyone took the towels. So people don't tell you the right information. They tell you what you think you want to hear. And my other observation about groups of people is the environment can impact them very much. When I used to have a board of directors who were a pain in the arse, if I wanted to have a contentious discussion, I'd organize the meeting in a small room, because people don't really like to be confrontational when they're close together. And if I wanted a big discussion with loads of people throwing ideas in and being a sort of aggressive, I would put them in a big room where there's a lot of space, and it would change the way they behaved. So I think if we understand how groups behave, we can then and this is the challenge that Lee put out in the email. How do we capitalize on the benefits of thinking together? And I think it's understanding group dynamics and the needs of the individual and the needs of the group and the needs of the organization. We can then create environments in which that can take place, because there are sometimes when you don't want a disruptor. There are some times when you want things to go smoothly. There are some times when you want someone to throw a grenade in. So sometimes you have Trevor in your group and sometimes you wouldn't. That's my thoughts for the day, and I'm glad it worked eventually.
Great, thanks, Ed. Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? You know, just a simple change of environment can change the way group dynamic works. It's a very interesting. So the question is, how do you do that in a Zoom session? You know, how much space do you have in the room, and how much space don't you have in the room? It's a bit of a different challenge. So yeah, one would have to think about ways of dealing with that one there. So right, Jasper, let's get across to you next.
Right. Morning. I was, in terms of groups, two examples came to mind. A negative one would be using Edward's analogy of putting people in a room and then understand the behavior of people, would be typically some of the large events I attended, mostly from people who are selling, call it a program or a property program or something like that. And I think the JT Foxes of this world and people like that are very good at how to work that kind of room. So they pack the room. They've got the people strategically positioned in the room. The event follows a certain style of building on your dreams and saying things, and then they would have testimonies, and then they would have their inevitable special offer now. And then a few select people run forward to get that special offer to create the credibility. And so that's certainly not an example of a disruption. It's more an example of how to study the behavior of people and then manipulate them so that you get the bulk of the people to say, I don't want to lose out, let me be part of this whole thing. But I had the benefit of being part of an organization for more than 40 years now, and I lived through various stages of that organization. And I want to almost just use that as an example of repositioning an organization, but at every step of the way, you needed to have some strong characters who could stand the pressures of the day and the opinions of the day. And I wasn't part of that, I just heard the stories. But right in the beginning, in the 70s, when multi-level marketing companies came to South Africa and started to proliferate, with them, there were a few genuine ones, but there were also a bunch of Ponzi schemes. So the initial battle that the company had was to fight an image that they're not a Ponzi scheme, and that was probably a process that took them close on 20 years just to break that shackles and prove the credibility. And it was the likes of a few very strong characters of those days that could stand the heat and carry on. And they then later on became the role models of people who then were the stability. But then there came a time when the company merged with two other companies, and all of a sudden you had the merging of three different cultures, three different marketing plans, three different product lines. And there was a time of huge uncertainty, and some other people had to step in to create that stability. And it was a couple of people from the different organizations that showed it can work. And it was probably another 10 years before that thing settled and people were comfortable with the new dynamics. And then I was part of that time too. But then I remember the explosion years and the critical years. So at the end of that merging, we found ourselves in 4 continents or 4 countries. And then what's the possibility now that we have this new streamlined product range and marketing plan? And it was a vision of expansion, and it needed a few disruptors to say, but it can be done, and go in and open up countries. And within a space of 10 years, from 4 countries, we grew to 50 countries. But if I look back, it wasn't a single person. It was at the right time, certain people who stepped forward, and you would probably in hindsight not have thought or pick them to be the initiators or disruptors, so to speak. But it's for me, that was a good example over a 40-year period of how you need these, call it maybe not the disruptors, call them change agents who understand the time and they know how to act in the time and then become the initiators. So that'll be my contribution.
Great, thanks, Jasper. I think a nice practical example of overnight success, you know, just 40 years later, you've got it all sorted. So yeah, no, I think it's really good. And you know, it takes a time to realize those kinds of things, especially in an organization that is growing, you know, in that kind of nature. And people think, oh, you know, this just happened, but it didn't just happen. You know, like you say, it took 40 years and you went through several iterations of different processes. And I think that's, you know, it's valuable insight into how to grow a multinational. So good, thanks for that. Right, Una, let's get across to you next.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this. I don't have that huge corporate experience of being involved in such a process. So it's great to hear what everybody says about it. But I'm also back with Lee's question as to when is it, when does it come destructive and when is it just good disruption? I think that to me will be an interesting thing to explore as to how do you know. And to also pick up on what Ed said is that we need stability and we need instability. We need both. So I suppose it's a fine balance. And yeah, you definitely get personalities and people that's quite good at disrupting it and that can see where we need to go and take people there. But also from my change management, some of the training I've done, I also know that it's a very, very tricky situation when you have to take a whole organization with you, with people supporting that idea. Yeah, so I end up also with more questions in the end as to what's the how do you know it's a good disruption and that it's gonna take you to a better place, and how do you do that and make sure you take everybody along?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it always comes down to leadership of one form or another, but let's see what Cecile thinks.
Hi, yeah, I have just been thinking about the space that I've been dealing in the last 6 months. And oh boy, this is a different world, this PPE world, because unfortunately we always have kind of 3 distinct groups in this space, where you have the suppliers, agents, and then the intermediate group that negotiate in between the suppliers and the buyers agents, and then the buyers agents who unfortunately 99 out of 100 times they will shipwreck the deals because they are the buyer's mandate, but they are greedy. So it's a good deal, but then they will always want more money. And the more money then will shipwreck the deal because the supplier says, no, you can't put that much commission onto any deal. Or they would make, from the buyer side, they would make demands on the supplier of processes that they don't want to follow. And that will shipwreck the deal. So it is highly frustrating coming from an environment where you talk directly to the buyer, being the company director or someone like that, and you do the deal and the deal is done. So this is running. You're driving to Durban to get to Cape Town, and then just to find out, oh no, you actually wanted to go to Windhoek. So it's just very, very frustrating. But I'm learning what you guys are all saying. but there's not much that one can do because you don't actually know or can come that close to either the supplier or the buyer's agents, and you never know how close it is to the buyer or the supplier when you start doing the dealings. But yeah, we are struggling along.
Thanks, Celia. It's interesting. I mean, all the other sort of thoughts have generally centered around internal groups and the dynamics there, and you talking now about trying to connect external groups and things. So yeah, it's something that I hadn't considered in terms of this discussion, but I think it brings a completely different level of thought into the mix. But Mpho, welcome back. Nice to see you again.
Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to piece the conversation together. So I'm just picking up bits and pieces. Sorry, I'm late. I had to take the kids to school. Can you just bring me up to speed regarding the topic?
We've been talking about the dynamics of group thinking of one form or another, and this morning's topic was about can we capitalize on the sort of groupthink element. We spoke on Friday about whether groupthink was good or bad, and the elements around that. But so this morning we're more moving into that process of, is there a way to leverage it, and how do we capitalize on the power of the group?
Okay. Yeah, it feels a little bit like what I do, isn't it? Somebody made a comment about things like focus groups. I've written a few articles about my views on focus groups that haven't made me very popular. I'm kind of like a believer of under a tree in a conversation, and that's what I've brought to the industry. Storytelling. And what I've found that when people are because when we run focus groups, there's so many things that are unnatural about a focus group environment. And then that damn mirror that I can't stand, of people watching you behind that mirror, and then somewhere in the middle while you're facilitating a focus groups, there's people bursting out laughing and you can hear. I can't stand focus groups, but when you leverage this concept of storytelling, so a group of people come together and they just share their stories, right? Exploration of anything and everything. People tend to kind of give you more and authentically. And they get into a space where they are comfortable enough to say, I've also had that experience, but this is how mine is different. So there's safety that comes through storytelling, where you're not constantly asking people, but why? Why is very confrontational, but when somebody's telling a story, you kind of say, oh, that's interesting, please tell me more, right? So the tone is different. So it's much easier to then leverage a group dynamic. And the crazy thing that we do then with those spaces, and Trevor is right, consumers don't know what the hell they want. And half the time they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But what is great about those dynamics is you are able to identify the deeper problems of what consumers are experiencing, and then you leverage that to then find the solutions. And what we've been doing now with corporates is to kind of say, we don't want to solve customers' problems that are happening now. We want to almost kind of like understand consumer psychology to be able to carry them into what the future needs. So there's a lot of innovation that the markets are not ready for, right? And all of these innovations have come from these stories, and they're not centered around what consumers think they need, but they start to sort of ignite conversations within innovation around what does the future look like. And for me, that's kind of been very exciting. And of course, in the world that I work in, we use that in a good and a bad way. So you must know that if nutrition is doing it, you must know that booze is also doing it, and so are cigarettes and condoms. So, you know, everybody is kind of doing it. And so that whole idea around getting groups of people to share and to engage is now being used very, very differently. It's almost kind of like we writing stories of what the future looks like, rather than kind of responding to immediate needs.
Yeah, it raises some very interesting questions and challenges in my mind, at least. And I love the fact that, you know, you've headed down the story route, because I mean, that's obviously central to what we like to do here at Wisdom, but from a very different perspective. But it is interesting how all of these things, one way or another, get turned into a manipulative tool of some form or another, isn't it? I mean, it's quite scary how the human seems to always take that turn, and certainly from a marketing perspective, quite frightening. Right, Nazipo, let's get across to you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Ivan, thank you. I'm not sure if I've got the topic right, but from what I understand, then that's how I'll comment. I personally love disruptors. I think the future belongs to disruptors. I think businesses should be centered around disruptors. I think without disruptors, we would struggle to get innovative. You know, I was reading a book not too long ago, which is called Blue Ocean Strategies, and it talks about how certain businesses have managed to create uncontested market spaces. And you are only able to get to uncontested market spaces if you are a disruptor. I love how disruptors, you know, they don't even consider competition as a benchmark, but they literally, they breathe to unseat competition. I think in a group setting, personally, if I had to set up groups, I would make sure that all groups are centered around disruptors, because what I think is disruptors, like we said earlier when she started, how they will come up with, they'll create a new idea before you've even tested the previous one. I think, you know, they run into the habit of being fast thinkers because they are about changing status quo and unseating things that are staying. And what they then need is a support team that's able to pick up on each ideas as they bring up new ideas. And so I think teams or groups should be built around, you know, saying this is the next idea, let somebody else run with an idea. I think people that are disruptors literally need to have two right-hand men that are always going to be running with their ideas. But I think they make a good contribution to innovation. I think the future will be led by disruptors. That's my contribution. Thanks.
Thanks, Nazipa. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It reminds me of a saying I've probably said on this forum more than once before, and that's the difference between the reasonable person and the unreasonable person. And the reasonable person tries to adapt themselves to the world, and the unreasonable person tries to adapt the world to themselves. Therefore, all progress is due to the unreasonable person. So yeah, I think it's the role of the disruptor is key. I couldn't agree more. Right, Donovan, let's get across to you next. Donovan, are you with us? Looks like Donovan's gazing off into the distance, so I'm not sure that he's hearing me. Donovan? No. Okay, I think that was everybody.
Maybe he's on a road trip.
Yeah, it looks like
he's watching a beautiful waterfall.
Yeah, I thought he was packing his car earlier in the session, so yeah, I think you might be right, Dumpo. But it doesn't look like he's hearing us at all at the moment. So yeah, I think that's all from me anyway. So Lee, back to you. Thoughts for tomorrow?
Well, thanks everyone. It really does stimulate the thinking because it is about our future, isn't it? That this isn't a theoretical discussion. This is something, how are we preparing our thinking and our way of working that is going to get us the results that we want? And so that's really the question that I would like us to think about for tomorrow is, and I sort of put it in the chat there, is if we're going to leverage the best of a group in terms of disruption, stability, taking into consideration context, what the market needs, what we are trying to glean from the market, whether in whatever form, testing products, listening to the stories. What defines success for us as a group? If we are leveraging what we want to out of the group, how would we know that we're doing well? And so that's really what I would like us to think about tomorrow is how do groups evaluate their success? So let's talk about that. But before I go on, I'd like to just kind of put a hand up. Trevor Carty, one of the things that we do is, and we've raised it already, is tell stories. And that's our life story. And I've interviewed you, I've heard a little bit of your life story. So I'm wondering at some point in time, maybe in the next few days, you could think about sharing your story with us to however much you want and to whatever level you'd like. We'd love to just get to know you a little bit, and we always find that we learn and grow through other people's stories. So would you be open to that, Trevor? Fantastic. Una's working on an article, so as soon as she's finished her article, we'll jump on you as well, Una, to tell your life story, if you're open to that. So, okay, that's us.
Great, thanks, Lee. Yeah, I see Donovan is back, but Donovan, you were sort of in and out, so we are just about to wrap up. But if you are with us now and you have any final thoughts, if you'd like to just add them in. No, looks like he's struggling with his connectivity again. Okay, folks, have a successful day further, fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Cheers now. Bye.